If you're sick of the mainstream sports outlets, well, so was I. So I started my own show. I'm Shane Larson, and this is the Game Time Guru. It's different than other talk shows. I'm providing a panoramic view on sports so you can see them through a different lens. So buckle up and let's go. Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Game Time Guru podcast. I'm Shane Larson, the host of the show, and today we've got another awesome interview from a local professional. It's the sports director from KTVB, Tust. He's joining us today to talk about his profession as well as some Boise State football. So a lot of the people who are listening are going to love this because you're going to hear about how sports, his passion for sports when he was just a little kid, helped him through his education, not just, playing sports, but his fascination with statistics and everything. So we've got an awesome show. Jay's going to be breaking down a lot of information for us. You're going to love it. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest onto the show. I said it before. It's Jay Tust, the sports director from KTVB. Jay, thanks for taking the time out of your freaking crazy schedule to join us and talk about your profession.
Shane, what's going on, man? Good to be a part of the show. You do a great job. I'm looking forward to this.
Awesome, man. I appreciate that, and I've been looking forward to getting a hold of you and getting this scheduled out for quite some time. So today's actually like the day where everything is coming together, and I'm really excited about it. Now, Jay, we've got like the local listeners. They kind of have an idea of who you are if they pay attention to sports. That's that's what my podcast is all about. But the people that are across the country that are listening here from North Carolina, Alabama, Michigan, all of those guys, and they know who they are. I kind of want to get a background of who you are. So we obviously know you're the sports director at KTVB, but we'll get to that point. I want to know your background in sports media. Have you always been into sports? And, what did got you into wanting to be into sports media, I should say?
I think like most people that get into sports media, they're one-time athletes and they just have a crazy passion for sports. For most of us, I guess for all of us, really, someday that comes sooner than for others. But eventually we can't play it anymore, and so we look for a way to still be involved and talk about it. And so that's basically what happened with me. I mean, I love football, but I always say that baseball always has my heart, just because my dad played it. I played it since I was 4. I didn't really start playing football until I was in high school, so baseball was really the thing that started this whole thing. And I'll tell you a funny story, Shane. When I was a kid, man, I hated reading. I didn't like, I didn't really like school that much. And it's kind of funny. My mom discovered how much I liked baseball cards. And I've always been a stat guy. I mean, since I can remember. And I love reading the back of the baseball cards. I would do division and multiplication and all that stuff, or addition, all that stuff. By figuring out batting averages or slugging percentages or hitting streaks, whatever it might be. And I loved it at an early age. And then on top of that, back in the day, they always had like little facts on the baseball cards about a player or something like that, and I'd always read them and recite them to my mom. And so she discovered that this was a way to like get me interested in reading and in school, and it worked like a charm. Like I'd read the newspaper every morning. That's kind of really how it all began for me. Sports has always been a huge part of my life, whether it be on the field or off the field.
Man, it's funny because you're saying that whole thing about statistics and everything. My buddy, a very good friend of mine, he's a coworker as well. His name's Clayton Panzeri. He's a huge stats guy, and especially with baseball, that's exactly who I thought of when you were talking. So that's funny, man. That's how it works, man. It looks like your mom figured out which way to get you kind of on the education route too. That's awesome. So you started playing, so you played baseball, and then obviously you said you played football when you got into high school. When did you decide, first off, where were you from? Are you from Idaho? Where are you from, and where'd you grow up?
I grew up in the Tacoma area up in Washington, born and raised up there. I mean, up until I left for college, lived in the same room my entire life. So we didn't move around much. My parents sunk their roots in Tacoma, and yeah, born and raised in Tacoma. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie 10 Things I Hate About You. That's the high school I went to. I know this movie's a little bit old, but it's a big castle-looking thing that overlooks the water. It's called Stadium High School. It's a pretty cool high school. I think we got the best football field in America, at least in terms of scenery. Google it if you don't know what I'm talking about. It's pretty cool.
Okay, so I recognize that movie. I was a little kid. I was in elementary school when that movie came out. But I do recognize that movie. And Tacoma, that's where Roberto Bergerson is from, is it not?
I believe so, yeah.
I can't remember which high school he went to, but I'm pretty sure Roberto Bergerson, Boise State legend, is from Tacoma, Washington. So you came here. Where did you go to school at? Where did you go to college?
So when I played baseball, like I said, I was a big baseball player. And so out of high school, I was actually drafted by the Cincinnati Reds, but I decided to go to college. Back then they had this thing called a draft and follow. So in order to stay draft eligible, I had to go to a junior college. So I went to a junior college for my first 2 years, transferred to Washington State, and in all honesty, I just kind of, I was just a little tired of playing, so I wanted to try something new. And this was something new, getting behind the mic.
That's crazy. Okay, so that's awesome. You kind of made that transition. It's not always an easy transition. People don't understand how much skill goes into actually, articulating everything and putting your thoughts together. And for you specifically, we know you here in Boise. Like I mentioned, we've seen you on TV. We see you on Twitter, Facebook. We hear you on the radio. Like we know who you are. You have a very large skill set. And when you got to Boise, though, you weren't the sports director, if I'm not mistaken. You worked your way into that role. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Actually, kind of a thing that I would say that I'm somewhat proud of, just because that was a point in time where you saw the sports director position dying in a lot of stations throughout, really the country, and they no longer had a sports director that by that title at KTVB, and I just tried to work really hard, and eventually my boss gave me the honor of bringing back that sports director title, and so that was something that's pretty cool, I think.
And as a sports director, tell us what you do. Like, tell the listeners what you do. If you could sum it up in like 60 seconds, which doesn't give you enough time, I know. But like, if you can sum up kind of what you do, you wear a lot of hats from what we can tell. But just like, what is your main job responsibilities as a sports director at KTVB?
I think that in a market this size, Boise's growing. Don't get me wrong, but in a market this size, you still really do have to be versatile. It's important to be versatile, but I mean, we really do a lot each and every day. Shoot, write, edit, anchor, you name it. We kind of, if you see me, tossing to a package or whatever it might be, there's a very good chance that, I did the interview, I wrote the feature piece, and then I edited it all together, and then I get up on a desk or stand on a blue field over in Boise State, and I introduce that, and hopefully the fans enjoy it. But we really do have to wear a lot of hats at KTVB. There are times where it can be a lot, but there are times where I really enjoy it. Like, one part of my job, I would say really in the last 2 years that I've tried to figure out new creative ways to do is shooting, sequence shooting, all that stuff. And I really find it kind of challenging, but if you can pull it off, you can really advance your storytelling or really make it all come together. So I do enjoy the challenges of it. Sometimes it's a lot, but I do enjoy the challenges of it. I'll say this, Shane. One thing that I love and I hate about being a sports anchor is people always think it's so easy, and I get it. Like, you get to go cover sporting events, but I mean, there are times where last week we traveled down to Alabama. I got about 2.5 hours of sleep on 2 or 3 nights last week just to make sure that, well, A, for traveling, B, for producing the pregame show and making sure that everything was scripted, edited, and all that stuff. So you wear a lot of hats, but you find ways to challenge yourself and really enjoy it, I think.
Man, it's crazy. Yeah, like I said, people don't understand. Even me just doing this podcast, and this is a very small portion, like the storytelling and stuff, the producing.
You don't have to dismiss it, Shane. I get it. It takes more time than people think on the outside because you try to produce quality. You could just record audio and throw it out there, but you like myself, we have similarities in this regard. That you want it to be high quality, you want it to be entertaining, you want it to be produced right, and so all of that stuff takes extra time, and oftentimes that's not necessarily accounted for by people. But that's okay. It's a humble part of the job that we kind of accept, right?
Dude, exactly, and I appreciate you bringing that up, man. It's good to hear it from somebody else. Like I like somebody like yourself, bigger name, being able to say that and educate the listeners. Now, Jay, part of like all of your things that you've done, I listed out a few things here. And speaking with some of my sports friends at our current job, I mean, obviously, my current job that I work full time is not a sports job, right? I do this as a hobby and something that I intend on building on later on in the future. But like my full-time job, luckily I have some sports fans there and we get to talk. And obviously your name comes up quite a bit. And we were discussing this the other day. That's why I made this list of some of the things that we enjoy from you. And we were talking about the press box, I believe is what the radio show was called. And you used to be on the press box. I think it was with BJ. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Yeah, see, we were talking about all the different sports shows that we've had in the Valley that had to get like shut down, and for one reason or another they just stopped. And we were talking about that. That was an amazing show. Like everybody loved that show. We were like, yeah, they were awesome. And so we got to hear you on the radio. We obviously saw you on TV. You're always on TV. You're talking on TV. And then you also have a podcast that you're doing with Dave Southern now. And so you have this skill set of not only being on camera but being behind the mic without a camera. I want to know what your preference is. Do you prefer to be on TV where you have to read off a teleprompter? What are the difficulties that come with it? Or do you prefer being behind a mic and just kind of chilling behind the scenes and talking?
You know what? It's actually refreshing. I don't know if this is just kind of like a scapegoat answer here, Shane, but it's kind of refreshing to have a little bit of a balance of both. They're all extremely different. And, I think that kind of like one thing I've really enjoyed about the podcast, and it's even more so than radio, you challenge yourself on the radio for it to be like this, but you still have commercial breaks and other things you have to worry about. With a podcast, it is a sports conversation, and it's natural and it's free-flowing, and eventually you get to about a 45-minute to an hour mark, and you decided that that's probably good for the day. With TV, it's very scripted, it's very structured. Again, that might sound, I don't mean to sound negative, but that just is what it is. It's scripted, it's structured. You get your talking points. You get your 3 minutes a night for sports, and then you move on. And so to have that balance of having a radio show or now having a podcast where you can get some of those other thoughts off your mind and really even opinions, that's a lot of fun. I offer my opinions at times when I'm on TV, but I also, I try to, and it varies depending on the topic, but I try to let my viewers decide what they want to believe. You present them with a bunch of facts and you let them make the decision. You don't make it for them. But there are certain times where, you have a prediction of an outcome of a game. I was wrong about the Stillwater game, by the way. Yeah, so it's, on the podcast, maybe you can give a little bit more of your opinion, dive a little further into stats and why you do stuff versus just presenting the facts on TV.
Oh, for sure. And one of the things that we've noticed is how this industry has evolved pretty quickly. I'm going to say like in the past 10 to 15 years since the time I was in high school till now, even like this industry has evolved because we've added social media and obviously podcasting has gotten into the mix and such. And one of the reasons people love you, Jay, is because you interact, you find different ways to connect with the community, right? You've got your social media platforms, especially Twitter, and I think that's awesome that you communicate with the sports fans throughout the Valley, basically just like with, for instance, when you were breaking down the Troy game, you analyzed it post-game. It was like a day or two later, and you were posting some topics about that, and that was when I first realized I was like, this is awesome. Jay's taking the time to analyze it and then post it out on Twitter for that fan base. And then obviously you have a different niche of people that watch TV and a different niche of people that will listen to your podcast. But it's cool that you're finding ways to, I guess, hit every one of your niches, every one of the, I don't know, one of the groups. But what would you say is so difficult about this? I mean, what would be the most difficult part with having all these different, outlets to have to communicate to, since it has evolved so much? Is it hard for you, or do you find it entertaining and fun?
I think that you just can't let it overwhelm yourself because there are so many. I mean, even for me, for example, like I love Twitter. I'm a big Twitter guy, and I think that Twitter fits the sports world. You watch it during live events. You get these 240 character updates throughout a sporting event, and people can, digest that as they're watching. But I'm not a huge Facebook guy, and I probably need to do a little bit more of that. Instagram is now growing momentum or building momentum. And so I think you can't let it overwhelm you. And I know that might sound silly to some. I get that. But, at times it feels like you're tweeting something and then you're going over and you're altering it for Facebook and then you're going to Instagram and you're modifying it for Instagram. You're just like, that all does add up. It all does take time. So I think you just kind of have to find out what works for you and not necessarily let it overwhelm you. I do love Twitter, and I do think that it's an awesome platform to interact with viewers or listeners or whatever it might be. In terms of, being versatile and appealing to different types of an audience, I think that you look for those stories. Like, for example, prior to the Oklahoma State game, I did a story on Achillian Butler, and I think that a lot of people, I was kind of starting to realize, Achillian Butler, he's healthy again, and he's contributing. He scored a touchdown against Troy. He added another one against UConn. But he, just talking with him, he told me about his dog and how last December, he was really struggling, staying positive and kind of mentally struggling with having to recover from an ACL injury, and he felt like he was kind of, separated from the team. It's hard when you're injured because you go from like the ultimate team inclusion every single day, watching video, being a part of, game planning, going out and practicing and doing this cyclical thing over and over again. And when you're injured, it's not, I want to say you're excluded from it, but you're just not a part of it. I mean, you're injured. And so he goes out and he gets this dog, and he said the dog was like a big reason why he was able to maintain a positive, a positive mindset throughout his injury. And even simply is coming home and seeing, the energy from his dog, that gave him energy to, attack his day and get on his rehab. And so you just talk about, I think that Achillian Butler would appeal to people because he's a football player, but all of a sudden by finding a connection with a dog, you're really going to open it up to an audience that doesn't just care about football. It's going to be, other parts of your audience that care about dogs or just relate to, or all of a sudden will have sympathy towards Achillian Butler because of what he went through. And so that's a challenge that I welcome and I love about my job. And, I guess I'll leave it at that. I think that those stories are a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. I love how you brought that up. That just kind of is a testament to your storytelling skills. Like, this job is in sports media or any kind of journalism field. It's a storytelling job. You have to be able to tell a story, and you do a great job at that. And you found that little piece of information that could appeal to a different set of listeners, and I think that's fantastic.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Quick, Shane, I don't mean to cut you off, but you talk about how our industry is changing and adapting, and I would honestly say, like, 10 years ago, that I don't know if somebody would have clung to that part of a story. They would be more interested in, again, the 2 touchdowns and Achillian as a football player. But if you get, one thing that viewers really like now is they like it when you humanize an athlete, and all of a sudden, not only can you relate to them, but you have a reason to root for them. And so that's something that's a way that's an area I'd say that has really evolved over the years. I still like watching game tape afterwards and trying to break it down in my own statistical perspective, and I think that shows that kind of the nuts and bolts sports fan in me. But when you talk about the industry changing, that's definitely part of it that has evolved or changed. Is you try to humanize those athletes and give people reason to relate to them or cheer for them, for that matter.
Man, very good point. I love that. Now it's going to be in my mind every time I see that now. See, that's why I like talking to people like yourself, because now when I see the journalists like yourself out there doing that, I'll see why. Like, I understand why it's happening now and the impact it has.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
I'm going to even backdate this a little bit more. So when we were down at Mountain West Media Days, we were talking with Brett Rippon. And this was just, we were kind of joking around. He got a dog as well, like, during the off season, and it's a little dog. His name's Willie Rippon. And so, we were asking him about it, and he's like, yeah, all that stuff. He's on his Instagram account, by the way, Willie Rippon. Go ahead and follow it. But then we asked Coach Harsin about it, and about being a small dog owner. And Coach Harsin says, well, I'm actually a small dog owner. And he wanted to say that, big dogs, that they can, they can tend to take more time. You have to go outside with them more and all that stuff. And so, that's just recognizing what you can manage, your own schedule and stuff like that. And just a small dog is probably easier to take care of. So he complimented Brett for kind of seeing that and getting a small dog. On top of that, it was at that point in time, so back in July, that Brett was kind of, Brett brought up the fact that, yeah, he goes, Achillian owns a dog. It's a big dog. I don't know how he does it. He lives by himself. And so I just kind of kept that in the back of my mind. And the first time that I got to ask Achillian about it, he was the one that kind of told me, like, yeah, he was kind of my almost recovery dog. That story kind of took life, and I was like, that's pretty cool. So you're always just kind of trying to pay attention to those little nuggets that can give a story, again, kind of that different life or that new life.
That's really impressive. It's cool that you got to keep that in the back of your mind. You remembered what he said, and then you kind of brought that up to Achillian when you had the opportunity. That's awesome. That's really cool that you got to do that. And I think that's huge for us that are trying to make our way through this industry as well, make our way into it, to remember. That's huge for me. It's going to be big for me and anybody else who's doing the same thing. Now, Jay, I noticed that right now I'm trying to word this correctly. So last night, it's a Friday night. You're covering some high school football, and then in the morning you're hosting a show, and then you're joining me. You're on this podcast, and so your hours are kind of crazy sometimes with all this sports stuff going on. How do you balance that for like a regular life? I put that in quotes, a quote-unquote regular life, when you're working such crazy hours like late nights on a Friday, early morning Saturday. Obviously, when football's going on, you got the games Saturday. You got to put together all your stories, this and that. Like, how do you balance that with the rest of your regular life?
It's a blessing and a curse because I never view it as work. I mean, when I'm tired and grinding, maybe I'll get a little agitated, but for the most part, I never really view it as work. I know that might sound cliche or whatever, but it's just the truth. I'll be sitting down watching a TV show with my wife, and I'll just kind of bust out my laptop and, if I rewatch a game, I go through it and I put a bunch of stats down basically as I record a bunch of stats as I'm watching the game, and then as we're watching another TV show, I'll just kind of open up my laptop and add them all up or whatever it might be, and then start to present them on social media or something like that. So it really is hard to separate yourself. But I would say that during football season, that doesn't really exist. I've tried to do a better job in the probably March to July months of taking a little bit more time away and almost recharging the batteries too, because during football season, there's not a whole lot of days off. There really aren't. I mean, technically my days off are Monday and Tuesdays, but we have Coach Harsin and the assistant coaches have their press conferences on Mondays, so I can't miss that. And then by Tuesday, it's the only open practice period of the week for Boise State. And then you also have player interviews. We also have our pregame show meeting on Tuesdays as well. So, this time of year on my days off, I probably spend about an average of 4 to 5 hours a day just at work. But again, the trade-off is that I try to take a little bit more time off when we're in those deader months, if you will.
Yeah, so to recharge the batteries essentially is what you're saying. I get it. Like that's crazy though. I mean, you look at it and I guess it's just that question that nobody really thinks of when they're a little kid watching like Stuart Scott and everybody on ESPN. You're watching them at night and you just assume that their life is normal, but when you really think about it, just like right now, there's a lot that goes into they're working at night for a reason. Most of their shifts are going to be, swing shifts, and then they're working weekends, and they're kind of nasty hours if you think about it. So it's just kind of interesting to hear it from your perspective, and I guess that is really good to be able to recharge the batteries, like you said, in those dead months, and then just go full out during the football season. And let's talk a little bit about football to finish off, Jay. Obviously, Boise State football, losing at Stillwater to Oklahoma State. It seems like to the outsider, and that's what's unfortunate, is a lot of those voters don't really pay attention to the full game. They'd see the score, and they're called stat watchers. We call them stat watchers that just see the stats, and they think it was a hideous game. Quite honestly, I think it was about 4 plays that changed that game completely around, and outside of those 4 plays, 2 of them being blocked punts, I thought Boise State was, at least head-to-head with them for the most part. I'm not going to say that they would have won, but they were head-to-head with them the entire game. I kind of want your thoughts on this, being so close to the team and being able to interact with everybody, coaching staff, players, whatnot. What do you feel about this year's football team? Do you feel like they have a different energy than they've had in the most recent years?
Yeah, I feel this team is a little unique. I can't quite put my finger on it, in all honesty, Shane, but this team has a unique feel to it. Whether it be they're more focused, more connected, I don't know exactly, but it feels different. I think it begins with Brett Rippon too. he seems different. And Brett's always been a guy that has put in ungodly hours in terms of preparation. I mean, you talk about the stuff that people don't see in terms of how much we work or how hard we work as members of the media. But, I mean, there's a lot that kid puts in that people have no clue about in terms of getting up and working out and watching film and then watching more film and then watching more film before going to practice and coming back and watching more film. So they have a different feel, and I just don't – this might sound biased, and I get it, but I don't feel like that performance in Stillwater was indicative of how good this team is. You know, I go back to my days when I covered the team when Chris Peterson was here, and his mood after a game. There were games that they lost. They didn't lose a lot under Coach Pete, but there were games that they lost here, and Coach Pete after the game, like, he was almost, I don't want to say like at peace or anything like that, but he did have like a sense of calmness to him just because I think he felt like the better team won that day. Now, there were also losses where Boise State could have played better and beat themselves, and that's where you would see an agitated Chris Peterson after a game. I think that if every coach is different, but if I was, if you look at that loss in Stillwater, I would be a little agitated if I was a coach. And I think Coach Harsin was a little agitated. If you listen to his post-game press conference, they could have played so much better. And I think that's what's disappointing about it. Would they have still beaten Oklahoma State? I don't know. It's probably unfair to say yes and dismiss the effort that Oklahoma State put forth. But if they were to play that game again, I'm really confident that it would be a very different outcome. And does that mean Boise State would have won? I'm not saying that, but it would have been a hell of a lot closer. From the blocked punts to some of the protection issues up front, a lot of people on social media were saying after the game that there was a noticeable speed difference between Boise State and Oklahoma State. And I think at times, yeah, you could see it. But you know what? There were some protection issues up front where guys were becoming untouched at times. And that has zero to do with speed or athleticism. I mean, heck, you or I could have sacked Brett Rippon on a couple of those plays. That's a communication issue up front. And so I do think a lot of the things that happened in that game, the negative things that happened in that game, I think this coaching staff will go back to work and get it corrected, and you'll see a better team moving forward. If this team can learn from it, they're still in the New Year's Six picture, in my opinion. If they can't learn from it, then they're not. They'll be a Vegas Bowl team or a Hawaii Bowl team or whatever. But I do think, I really believe that this team will learn from it. I really believe that they will. Only time will tell, though.
For sure. And I guess this is a question that a lot of people are, throwing out there. Do you feel that they can compete at the highest level with some of the biggest schools? I'm not saying college football playoff style, but you mentioned New Year's Six Bowl. Do you feel like we could compete and, for that matter, win against some of the bigger schools in the top 10?
If I wanted to be short-sighted, I could say no. But let me ask you this. Do you feel like Boise State is superior athletically now to the team that they rolled out there against Oklahoma in 2007? I mean, I believe the answer is yes. What do you think?
Actually, if we're getting down to the nitty gritty, we had a couple NFL players on that team, but I think this team we've got right now, athletically speaking, is actually far superior to what we had back in 06-07.
I mean, if you're going from number 1 to 105 on the roster, the collective group, I would think that this group is more athletic, and I'm sorry if people disagree with that, but I think it would be the case. Now, what I'm getting to is that 2017 was special. They were dialed. If that 2017 can beat Oklahoma, who was 7th ranked in the country, and Boise State is from top to bottom maybe more athletic today, I don't see why that can't be the case. I mean, they went down and they rolled Oregon. It was 38-28 in the Vegas Bowl last year. It should have been way more than that. They could have killed those guys even worse if it weren't for a couple of things that happened in that game too. I mean, Boise State that game should have been even more lopsided than it was. I think it's an excuse. I do. I think it's an excuse. I think that when it's talking about we need to be more athletic or stuff like that, you're diminishing how good Boise State in the past has been between the ears on special teams. Special teams is a part of the game where Boise State has long created a competitive advantage when going up against Power 5 opponents. And when you go down to Stillwater, I mean, they got crushed in special teams in Stillwater. Absolutely crushed. You talk about not being able to turn the ball over on the road. You can't give up 2 blocked punts that result in touchdowns. I mean, one directly resulted in a touchdown. One took a couple of plays, but it eventually was it turned into a touchdown for the Cowboys. You can't do that stuff. And so by saying that they're not as big or athletic or not big enough or athletic enough, I think it's an excuse because you got to find a way. And if there's any program in the country that has always found a way, it appears, I would have to say it's the Boise State football team. They've always found a way to maximize talent, effort, and do more with less.
I like it, man. You're giving us a little bit of hope as Bronco fans, so that's awesome. I mean, I just needed to hear it from somebody that's in the, in the mix of it all, and that's yourself. Now, Jay, just to finish, last question I got for you, sir, is, you're here. You've been in Boise. We like you here. We obviously want you to stay here, if that is the case. But I just want to know what your future goals are. Do you intend on keeping, the sports director job and kind of as it continues to evolve in this industry, like we talked about earlier? Do you intend on growing it within, the Valley? Or if something presented itself for like a major network, do you see yourself, like everybody has a dream job. Do you have a dream of going somewhere else, or are you kind of just open to letting things happen as they go?
Yeah, I'm a little open to it. I'm also to the point in time in my life where I don't really get to make all the decisions selfishly anymore, I guess you could say. A few years ago, I wasn't married, I didn't have a house, and I'll just throw the dog in there too. I didn't have one of those either. But now I got a wife, I got a dog, and I got a house. And so my roots are a little bit deeper here. They're sunk in. So when I first got into this, Shane, I wanted to be on ESPN. I wanted to be the next Stuart Scott or the next Scott Van Pelt or any of those guys that I've looked up to for so long. But I think that, I have enjoyed the local sports scene. It is fun to be a part of a community. It's different. I don't want to be just wallpaper presenting sports highlights. I want to connect with people. And when you're a local sports guy, you really do have the opportunity to do that. I didn't see that part of this when I initially got into this business a decade ago, but I've certainly enjoyed it. And so I love Boise. Boise is a growing market. It's a growing city. It's a great place to be. My wife's from here. I go home every now and then, and it takes me 2 hours to get to Seattle, and it takes me 5 minutes to get to work from where I live to KTVB, so I can't complain about that. There's a lot of perks to living here. Will I be here forever? Honestly, I don't know, but I'm going to enjoy the heck out of it while I am here because I really do think, as a lot of people think, that Boise's a special place. Everybody that comes here raves about this place, and it has certainly sucked me in, no doubt about it. So
I love it, man. And if you stay here, we'll be happy to have you here, man. We love you here. So yeah, so that's not a problem at all. So if you decide that this is where you want to continue to live for the rest of your life and cover sports for us, that's totally fine because us sports fans love it. Once again, guys, I've got Jay Tust here joining me, sports director of KTVB here in the Boise Valley, the Treasure Valley, for anybody who's not here from Idaho. And once again, Jay, I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your day, out of your hectic schedule, as we found out today, to join me and do this interview.
Yeah, and one last thing for me, to you and anybody else, keep chasing the dream. When I was a kid, I mentioned that sports motivated me to read, do addition, and all that stuff. I was also extremely shy. I hated speaking in front of the class. I hated reading in front of the class. But sports has always been this passion of mine, and it's always pushed me to do a little bit more. And if you would have asked me when I was in high school that I would be, talking on TV each and every night, I would have said there's no way I would have had the guts to do it. But just keep chasing the dream, man, and follow your passion. And that's what it's all about. If you love what you do, you don't work. It's true. Like, if you love what you do, it really doesn't feel like you're working. So I encourage everybody to chase that, I guess. But Shane, keep it up, man. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Jay. Thanks for those words. And for all the listeners out there, hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. You know the drill. Subscribe to the show, and we'll talk to you next week. Guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of my show. Now, if you could go and do me a favor, head over to iTunes, give me 5 stars, and leave me a review, it would be greatly appreciated. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your support.